Happy Agriculture Day. Today we honor the men and women who work every day to feed, fuel, and clothe the people of the United States and the world. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue hosted Vice President Pence at the Department of Agriculture to commemorate the day. As you may remember, when the President spoke at the American Farm Bureau Convention earlier this year, he said, "Our farmers deserve a government that serves their interest and empowers them to do the hard work they love to do so much." This administration is making sure government does that by reducing burdensome regulations, allowing them to be more productive, by cutting their taxes and empowering them to make their own decisions about investing in their operations, and by working to make sure our trade agreements are fair and that other countries play by the rules. The President was proud to issue a proclamation declaring today the 45th Annual National Ag Day. Earlier today, the President was pleased to welcome Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to the White House. This meeting provided an opportunity to make progress on a range of issues, including Syria and its sponsors, Yemen, the GCC, and our Israeli-Palestinian peace efforts. Today, we were able to engage with Saudi leadership as we do on an ongoing basis to increase our coordination on regional issues, advance shared strategic objectives, and develop new channels and capabilities to institutionalize these interactions. This afternoon, the President will also meet with top law enforcement officials, members of Congress, and administration leaders to discuss the threats of lawless sanctuary cities. Sanctuary jurisdictions release thousands of criminal aliens out of our prisons and jails and back into our communities. Such policies threaten the safety and security of our people. Every American family deserves to live in safety and security in their home and their neighborhood. Sanctuary cities make that goal much more difficult to achieve, and the President is committed to restoring the rule of law in these communities. We're also continuing to monitor the situations both in Austin, Texas, and in Maryland. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims involved in these situations, and we'll continue to work with state and local law enforcement officials around both of those incidents. And with that, I'll take your questions. John.
Sarah, let me start by asking you what the President said about potentially meeting with Vladimir Putin, quote, soon. There's nothing that will put them in the same city at the same time until November at the earliest. So what he's talking about in terms of June, would that include either a visit of Putin to the White House or the President going to Russia?
There are no specific plans made at this time, but we want to continue to have a dialogue with Russia and continue to talk about some of the shared interests we have, whether it's North Korea, Iran, and particularly, as the President noted today, slowing the tensions when it comes to an arms race, something that is clearly important to both leaders.
And now that Putin has won yet another term as president, is President Trump concerned that he will continue his aggressive posture toward the rest of the world and maybe even increase that posture?
Look, we're going to continue to maintain the position that we've had and be tough when necessary. At the same time, we want to continue to have dialogue so that we can work on some of the issues that concern both countries. And we're going to continue to do that while also continuing to be tough on a number of things, including sanctions on Russia, rebuilding our own military, and exporting energy, things that we know are not great for Russia. Major?
Get your reaction to a statement that Senator John McCain, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, just put out, and I'm quoting him directly here. An American president does not lead the free world by congratulating dictators on winning sham elections. And by doing so with Vladimir Putin, President Trump insulted every Russian citizen who was denied the right to vote in a free and fair election to determine their country's future, including the countless Russian patriots who have risked so much protest and resist Putin's regime. How do you respond?
Look, the President once again has maintained that it's important for us to have a dialogue with Russia so that we can focus on some areas of shared interest, the ones that I've already named. At the same time, we're going to continue to be tough on them. The President joined other countries in these calls. Both Germany and France have reached out, as well as President Obama in 2012. These are conversations that sometimes take place, and certainly the President finds there to be an importance in having that dialogue with Russia so that we can talk about some of the big problems that face the world.
Does the White House disagree with Senator McCain's characterization of this as a sham election?
We disagree with the fact that we shouldn't have conversations with Russia. There are important topics that we should be able to discuss, and that is why the president's going to continue to have that dialogue. At the same time, we've been very clear in the actions that we've taken that we're going to be tough on Russia, particularly when it comes to areas that we feel where they've stepped out of place. We've placed tough sanctions on Russia and a number of other things where we have shown exactly what our position is.
You brought up in context of John's question about timing, since you mentioned North Korea and Iran, is it the president's intention to meet with Vladimir Putin before he sees Kim Jong-un or makes a decision on the Iran nuclear deal?
Again, we don't have any specific plans laid out at this time.
Sarah, but neither the White House readout of that phone call with Putin nor the Kremlin's readout says anything about election meddling. Did the president not raise the issue of Russian election meddling in that phone call?
I don't believe it came up on this specific call, but it is something that we've spoken extensively about and continue to look at ways and steps forward to make sure it never happens again.
And on the president's new attorney, Joe DeGeneva, he says that there is this brazen plot by the FBI and the DOJ to frame the president. Does the White House share that view? Is there a plot to frame President Trump?
Look, we certainly have said that there have been some concerns with some of the actions that were taken, but in terms of any comments that he's made, I couldn't speak to those. Matthew?
Thanks, Sarah. Two more questions on the Putin phone call. First, does the White House believe the election in Russia was free and fair?
I'm sorry?
Does the White House believe that the election in Russia was free and fair?
Look, in terms of the election, we're focused on our elections. We don't get to dictate how other countries operate. What we do know is that Putin has been elected in their country, and that's not something that we can dictate to them how they operate. We can only focus on the freeness and the fairness of our elections, something we 100% fully support, and something we're going to continue to do everything we can to protect, to make sure bad actors don't have the opportunity to impact them in any way.
And you said election meddling didn't come up in the call. I'm curious, did the recent poisoning in the United Kingdom come up in the call?
I don't believe that was discussed in today's call. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Over the weekend on one of the Sunday morning shows, Trey Gowdy, Republican of South Carolina, said when responding to the various tweets that the president had put out over the weekend regarding Special Counsel Robert Mueller, he said, when you're innocent, act like it. What is your response to what Trey Gowdy said over the weekend?
Look, the president has been very clear about the fact that there was no collusion between his campaign and any other entity. However, to pretend like going through this absurd process for over a year would not bring frustration seems a little bit ridiculous. I don't think that any individual, including members of Congress, would like it if they had been accused of taking their seat in Congress by doing something nefarious when they hadn't, particularly if it went on for more than a year into their time in office. My guess is they would be more than anxious to push back and certainly would defend themselves, as the president has clearly done in this situation and has since day one.
Another Republican over the weekend, Lindsey Graham, also a Republican from South Carolina, said that if the president were to fire...
Maybe we need to work on our South Carolina members.
He said that if the president tries to fire Robert Mueller, it would be the beginning of the end of his presidency. What's your response to what Lindsey Graham said?
Yeah, as White House counsel Ty Cobb said earlier this week, the White House yet again confirms that the president is not considering or discussing the firing of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Bless you. Pamela?
Losing Republicans in the sense...
Sorry?
Do you feel like you're losing Republicans in some way, that these two prominent Republicans from South Carolina both spoke in this manner over the weekend?
I certainly don't think we're losing Republicans at all. I think we're voicing some frustration over this ongoing process that we look forward to ending soon. Pamela?
In January, the president told a room full of reporters that he would love to sit down and do an interview with Robert Mueller under oath. And in just a couple of weeks at the time, that's what he said. Obviously, that time frame has passed. Does he still want to sit down and do an interview with Robert Mueller?
Look, we've been fully transparent throughout this process. We've been fully cooperative, and we're going to continue to be cooperative with the Office of Special Counsel. Beyond that, I can't go any further.
Can you just Provide more clarity on the president's tweets toward Robert Mueller over the weekend, calling him out by name. What was behind that?
Like I just said, clearly we have not been shy about the fact that there is frustration of this process. We would like it to end quickly and soon, and the president has contended since day one and will continue to do so that there was absolutely no collusion between his campaign and any outside force or country. And so I don't understand why it's hard for anyone to process. If you had been attacked mercilessly and continuously, day in, day out, every single second, while you're trying to work hard to do good things for this country, and literally every day you wake up to an onslaught of people saying that you're there because of reasons that are completely false, that's frustrating, and certainly I think fair for him to be frustrated.
Why doesn't he push for the firing of Robert Mueller if he thinks the probe shouldn't have begun in the first place? If he thinks the whole thing is a witch hunt, why doesn't he push for the firing?
Look, we're going to continue to be cooperative, and we would like this to wrap up soon. We don't feel like that's the most productive step forward, but we would like to see this come to a conclusion. Jordan.
Thanks, Sarah. I want to follow up on the accusations of fraud in the Russian election. Why does the United States government not believe that it should criticize Russia for these accusations, which have been brought up by the OSCE and UK government directly in the statement? You know, they're listing things like restrictions on fundamental freedoms and lack of access for opposition candidates. I mean, why doesn't the president of the White House believe that's something that they should be discussing with the Russian leader?
I didn't say that we couldn't discuss it with the Russian leader. I said it didn't come up on today's call. Again, the focus was to talk about areas of shared interest. We know that we need to continue a dialogue. It's important for a lot of the safety and security of people across the globe. We would like to be able to work with them on things like North Korea, on Iran, and also both countries shared interest in lowering the tensions when it comes to an arms race, recognizing that that's not the best thing for either country. And so we want to be able to have those conversations, and that was the point of today's call. John?
When's an appropriate time to raise questions about political freedoms with Russia?
Look, we've continued to talk about these important issues, but that's not simply what today's call was about. John?
Thank you, Sarah. Two questions. First, we've discussed the president's call to President Putin following his re-election. Did the president make a similar call to Chancellor Angela Merkel, who has just formed a new government and assumed her fourth mandate in Berlin?
I know he spoke with the chancellor, I believe it was last week. I'd have to look back at the specific details of their conversation, but I know that they spoke within the last week.
The other thing is that Congressman Ryan Costello of Pennsylvania is expected, if not today, sometime in the coming weeks, to announce he's not running for re-election, making him the 38th Republican House member to announce retirement, resignation, or pursuit of another office, a post-World War II high in the exodus of Republican House members. Is this something the president is bothered about, and do members call him when they say he'll make announcements like this?
Certainly he's had conversations with a number of members. I can't speak to this situation specifically and whether or not he's spoken with the president. We're not concerned right now. We think we've got a great story to tell after the first year of being in office, and we look forward to communicating that to the American people and continuing to push the president's agenda. David?
Sarah, did the topic of religious liberty come up at all with the Crown Prince today? Did the president bring that up at all? Do you know?
I don't believe that came up, but I'd have to check on the last half of the meeting to be sure, because I wasn't there. Trey?
Thanks, Sarah. Two foreign policy questions for you. Human Rights Watch estimates that the Saudi-led coalition is responsible in 2017 for the deaths of 1,000 civilians and took part in 85 unlawful airstrikes. Did the president bring up these concerns about high civilian casualties in his meeting with the Crown Prince today?
I'm not aware that that came up specifically. Again, I'd have to check on the last half of the meeting because I'm not sure.
About the call between President Trump and Russian President Putin. The Russians said that Syria came up in the call. The readout that was released by the Trump administration did not include any mention of Syria. Did the president discuss the issue of Syria with Vladimir Putin, and did he discuss the high civilian casualties as a result of efforts by the Assad regime and the Russian government on the ground in Syria?
It briefly came up, and as you know, we've had a number of public statements on our position there, and that certainly has not changed.
Yesterday, the Canadian Prime Minister noticed the signs of the pace of NAFTA talks is accelerating, and he said that the President Trump, is enthusiastic about getting a deal. Is the President that enthusiastic?
The President's always enthusiastic about making a good deal, but that would be the key caveat to any conversation, is making sure that whatever deal he makes is good for Americans and American workers. And so anything we do, that would have to be part of that conversation.
There seems to be a end of April deadline. After that, the entire political process is going to get over the negotiations on NAFTA. Anything possible be that quick within 6 weeks?
I don't have any specific announcement at this time, but we're continuing to have those negotiations and continuing to have those conversations being led primarily by Ambassador Lighthizer and working with the President. Take one last question for the President's event. Jonathan?
Thank you, Sarah. The President frequently speaks about the need to improve the nation's crumbling infrastructure. Can you explain his opposition to the Gateway Project, which is a rail tunnel between New Jersey and his home state of New York that has the support of many Republicans and also, according to one study, is key to 20% of the nation's gross national product?
The President specifically wants to address infrastructure on a broader scale, not put all our emphasis into one project. We certainly want to see the infrastructure across this country rebuilt, which is why we put forward priorities when it comes to that in a plan moving forward, and we look forward to working with Congress to make some real progress on that in the coming days. Thanks so much, and the President's got an event here in just a few minutes. Thanks, guys.
But we
Hello there and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm ABC News Political Director Rick Klein, joined here by Pierre Thomas. Thanks for being here. Our Senior Justice Correspondent, Catherine Faulders from our White House team, and up on Capitol Hill, we'll get to him in a second, John Parkinson. And guys, today the big headline is the President decides to make a phone call. He calls Vladimir Putin, congratulates him on his election victory, talks about his plans to meet at some point, another big meeting maybe on the agenda. And we just learned from the White House they did not talk about Russia meddling, and they did not talk about the poisoning over in the UK. Pierre, once again, the President has a chance to weigh in on these things, and we're seeing him not say bad things to or about Vladimir Putin.
Very interesting, and you saw this rather dramatic response from Senator McCain, deeply critical of the President for calling to congratulate Putin on what he essentially called a sham election.
And Rick, I know, President Obama used similar language as well in 2012 when he called Putin to congratulate him. But striking that Sarah Sanders kept saying, we're going to remain tough on Russia, couldn't really offer too many specifics there, and really notable that in their phone call, their last phone call was February 12th, they didn't speak about election meddling. Cecilia Vega asked, did that come up? And Sarah Sanders said she didn't believe that came up along with the poisoning attack in the UK.
And I think the challenging thing here as well is that, look, this spy case in Russia, in London, where the man and his daughter were significantly injured, and then you had a death under suspicious circumstances in that country as well. For that to happen so soon and that to not come up, you're going to see a lot of critics attacking the President on that.
Let's take a look at what the President said in the Oval Office just a short time ago today.
I had a call with President Putin and congratulated him on the victory, his electoral victory. We had a very good call, and I suspect that we'll probably be meeting in the not-too-distant future to discuss the arms race, which is getting out of control, but we will never allow anybody to have anything even close to what we have, and also to discuss Ukraine and Syria and North Korea and various other things. So I think probably we'll be seeing President Putin in the not-too-distant future.
So congratulations on that election victory, but Pierre, again, the White House had an opportunity, Sarah Sanders, a few moments ago, to condemn that election process, far from an open process. That was what Senator McCain had to say, and Sarah Sanders said essentially, we don't have to lecture other countries on their processes.
Well, to be fair to the president, clearly their argument is that they're talking about the significant bilateral issues that are facing both countries. But these other issues are very much in the news, and there's pressure, including among Republicans, as we see from McCain, for the president to push Putin on these issues. Are you involved in this kind of activity in terms of assassinating people or attempting to assassinate people? Also, the notion that our election was attacked, the intelligence community believes that that took place, and why is the president not pushing Putin on that issue?
And in fact, a remarkable juxtaposition of images, because at the very moment that the president was talking in the Oval Office, up on Capitol Hill, John Parkinson, we heard from bipartisan members of the Senate Intelligence Committee outlining their recommendations for combating Russian meddling in the next elections, which, by the way, have already begun. We're in the middle of the primaries. There's more voting today, even in Illinois. And John, you heard that unanimity from members of that committee in condemning Russia and saying there needs to be this strong resolve, but they weren't taking questions on whether the president needed to be stronger.
Yeah, that's right. And you saw, the House of Representatives also has concluded its investigation, and really the Speaker and everybody else here on Capitol Hill are trying to move forward now. As you said, the primaries are getting underway. The votes are starting to be cast. We see votes today in Illinois, and they really want to move forward with these recommendations, give these committees enough time to come up with a process that they can ensure that this won't happen again in the future.
And moving on now to the latest in Bob Mueller's investigation. This is the first time the White House was put direct questions on camera about the president's tweets over the weekend. Pierre, very critical of Bob Mueller. The first time he mentioned Mueller by name. We know that the president is making some changes to his legal team along the way. What did you make of this today? I mean, the White House saying that they're clearly frustrated that this isn't ending. They're on the record and wanting it to end soon. How are they calibrating the pressure here? How's it being read?
Well, I think clearly the White House aides have no control over what the president thinks.
Clearly, we learned that.
So let's get that on the record. And he's frustrated. He's making that frustration known. Again, he's used Twitter in ways that no other president has ever done. And when he's thinking something, when he's feeling something, that's the way it manifests itself. Clearly, though, they know that attacking Mueller in this way does have its costs. And you saw Republicans on the Sunday talk shows making that clear. You had Senator Graham talking about the fact that that could be the end of his presidency if he were to fire Mueller. Also, Congressman Gowdy saying that the president should don't protest too loudly is what I took from his conversation. So again, it's a delicate balance that the White House is walking in terms of explaining the president's actions. He's frustrated. He wants this investigation over. He thinks that it puts a cloud over his presidency. And from his standpoint, if he thinks nothing has been done wrong on his side, he wants that known. But on the other hand, when the president and his supporters talk about the fact that there's no collusion, there is the fact that Bob Mueller's investigation is looking into some very real facts. Someone from Russia suggested that there was dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of emails, and the president's son took a meeting to get the information, saying, quote, "I love it." So it's not like Bob Mueller and that team is going to look at an event like that and say, oh, there's nothing there to investigate.
And Rick, I think to Pierre's point is, yes, the president is frustrated this hasn't wrapped up. In fact, his own legal team, especially Ty Cobb inside the White House, has told him November it's going to be over, December, the new year, and here we are in March, and frankly, it's far from over, and I think it's more of a reality for President Trump now as he expands his legal team. We know that some people have been called to join, so expanding your legal team, it doesn't necessarily signal that this is close to over with the new subpoenas of the Trump organization. I think he is definitely frustrated by some of that legal advice he's been getting as well.
Yeah, Joe DeGena joining the team as well. He seems to be campaigning for it on cable TV.
Well, and the other thing is, we have to look at the circumstances that have been pointing to a long-term investigation. December, recently, you have guilty pleas involving the former national security advisor lying about what? A conversation that he had with the then Russian ambassador. You have former campaign advisor Gates, who recently pled guilty as well. You have the ongoing legal case against Paul Manafort. So this case, this investigation appears far from over. And I think there's a collective understanding underway in the White House with the president and his legal team that that's the case, and that all these pronouncements about, well, maybe it'll be over by Thanksgiving, and maybe it'll be over by December, and maybe it'll be over at the beginning of the year, those are not coming true.
Yeah, all that happy talk.
I just say just one point. Sarah Sanders dodged in the briefing whether the president would still sit down with Robert Mueller. The White House and aides have dodged this, but the president himself hasn't really wavered on that. He says he still wants to do it.
He's inconsistent.
Yeah, and guys, one other thing, you have this unfolding story about Facebook.
Yeah. Which has an impact. Cambridge Analytica was employed by the Trump campaign. There's a potential link there as well.
Exactly. And so we have this situation where Facebook is angry and under pressure because the private information profiles of 50 million Americans may have been shared without those people knowing that took place. The company involved with that is Cambridge Analytica, as you mentioned. There's a question as to who is responsible for doing that. This person is described as Russian-American who did this research. There are a lot of questions about who is this person and work that he may have been doing, I emphasize, in Russia at the time. So again, we're on the cusp of this investigation taking some dramatic turns.
So before we let you go, Pierre, and get the other half of your beat, the unfolding situation right now in Texas, this explosion at a FedEx facility. We understand that it was something that was mailed inside of Austin. There's got the sense of real concern in Texas over this. The White House, until today, the president himself didn't respond to any of this. What's your sense so far of the federal response?
Well, there are hundreds of federal agents and analysts now in Texas. That tells you a lot about how dire the situation is. Also the fact that the Attorney General, the FBI Director are getting regular updates about this case. And here's what's concerning. You have the potential, and I emphasize the word the potential, of a serial bomber involving one or more persons. Whoever is doing this has deadly intentions. 2 people have died. So if this was supposed to be vandalism or something like that where no one was supposed to get hurt, well, no, people have died.
Yeah, right.
And this activity is continuing. So I cannot emphasize what a dangerous situation this actually is.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. Pierre, we'll let you get back to the job. Thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure.
And Catherine, before we move on to any other topics, there's another thing in the news just today, the school shooting in Maryland. The shooter has died. Thankfully, no other fatalities. But it comes as an interesting time as well because we have the potential for a major gun debate here, and we have the March for Life happening just this weekend to try to get action on guns. It really spotlights the fact that nothing's happened.
Absolutely, it sure does. Of course, that's coming up this weekend on Saturday, led by those students in the Parkland shooting who really have been activists behind this. There's some meeting with the president in the Oval Office or at the White House to discuss some gun legislation and gun reforms. But I do think that with this tragedy happening in Maryland just right before Saturday, it does put a spotlight on it. It does bring attention to the fact that there's been a lot of talk and discussions about this at the White House with the president, but we haven't really seen that transform into anything legislatively.
And meanwhile, speaking of legislation, there's going to have to be some by the end of the week because the government funding runs out all over again. John Parkinson, let's check in on this. We have an extra variable this time, which is snow. There's a major storm barreling down on Washington, expected to dump a whole lot of snow on members of Congress and everyone else in the next 24, 48 hours. It could impact members' travel. It could impact plans to get around. It could impact actually government shutdown. What's the buzz right now and the likelihood that we're going to go into Friday without a bill?
Well, we were expecting to see that bill last night. It did not get done. They say that today there's probably about 20 policy riders that are still open for debate, that are on the table, that negotiators are trading back and forth. And then there's at least another dozen more issues that negotiators are also talking through. And now this has to be a negotiation that's signed off by both House and Senate Republicans and Democrats, but also the White House. So you're seeing the White House factor into these negotiations that last night went until 1 a.m., picked up again at 7:30 in the morning. So, like you said, we have 4 days left until the shutdown deadline on the end of the day on Friday. And right now, it looks like they're not close. Speaker Ryan said that he hopes to get legislative text posted today, but that's really what we heard 24 hours ago. So right now, we're just seeing that they're really delaying and dragging these negotiations on.
And Catherine, one wrinkle out of this is that we learned again the White House offering a deal to Democrats to try to get a DACA extension in exchange for some wall funding. The White House saying that they were shot down by the Democrats on this. Immigration could end up being a piece of this deal still as well.
Absolutely, immigration could end up being a piece of this. You saw the president yesterday tweet, for the spending plan by midnight, the Democrats do not want to help DACA. It would be so easy to make a deal, Rick. So it seems like every time we come to this, we get back to the immigration debate. So absolutely, something we could see as well.
All right, let's bring this in for a landing. John Parkinson, final thoughts today. Any advancement of the wall, and what'd you learn?
Well, I mean, I think that over the last 24 hours, what we've seen is that nobody's getting up from the table. There seem to be willing partners to come up with a bipartisan deal. Look, I think that Republican leaders know that they're not going to get the most conservative members of their conference to vote for this, whereas I think Democrats also concede that none of the Senate Democrats who are eyeing a presidential bid maybe in a few years are going to get on board. But what you really see is these people that have voted consistently to end the last couple of shutdowns coming forth, supporting this. It's a $1.3 trillion bill that's coming together. And so there's a lot of goodies that everybody's trying to get in there at the last minute. And I think that's why these negotiations are dragging on. But bottom line, I do not see a shutdown happening on Friday night.
Almost certainly the last legislative action of the year, and it's only March. John Parkinson on the Hill. Thanks. Thank you, sir. Catherine, what did you learn today?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question, Rick. I mean, I think a lot of what we were just talking about, really, the spotlight again is on gun legislation. And going into this weekend, I think that the discussion this week, at least for the remainder of the week, will focus on that. So I think it's the White House will continue getting these hard questions from reporters as what they're going to do about this. And I think we could continue to see a lot more of that going forward this week.
And for me, it's the concern about Bob Mueller in this investigation.
Yes.
Clearly, it's on the president's mind. It's on the White House's mind. They've made clear their frustrations. The president is making clear through his public moves, both the tweets and the hirings, that he is not satisfied about where things are headed. There's a sense that I'm picking up on, I'm sure you as well, that they feel like something else is happening here. It's something they're moving towards something. We've heard a lot about behind-the-scenes negotiations, about his cooperation. It seems like things are moving again.
Things are moving again. We'll probably see more movement in that this week, and also keep an eye on the legal team. There may be more changes to come on that.
And they're busy with a whole bunch
Very
of different
busy.
fronts. All right, Catherine Folders, thanks so much. That does it for this edition of The Briefing Room. You can download the ABC News app. I'm ABC News Political Director Rick Klein. We will be back here next time with another edition of The Briefing Room.